I just sent him an email, so hopefully we can get him on the line here as well.
So how was the retreat? I'm sorry I couldn't participate.
It was interesting.
Remember, you're live. You're live now, and you're being recorded. So only say nice things. It was interesting. Interesting is one of those things we say about wines that we're not sure whether we like or not.
Yeah, and it's also an old Chinese curse. So
Live in interesting times.
yeah. So actually, I'm gonna take a little time in the commissioner comments and report
Debrief
out
a little.
Oh, great. That'd be super. I'm sorry I couldn't participate.
Well, it's okay. I was the only one there from
Yeah, well,
and there was one person in the library board there. The entire planning commission attended, it's an interesting group.
Well, it's good that we had participation from every group, though. It was great.
Well, it is 6 o'clock. It's actually a minute past, but I don't see.
I don't see Mark. Let me see if I can get a hold of him some
let's
other
wait
way.
these 5 minutes and ask if anyone's in the audience to hold on.
Somebody barked in the background.
Oh, pardon me?
Somebody barked in the background.
Oh, yeah, we have a golden poodle. She's a year old and she's vocal. Yeah, with only 3 commissioners, as Megan and I were talking, there's no room for wiggle room.
Right. One of the items I talked to the council about, actually.
I bet.
This will be an interesting issue, Megan. There's actually no action items on the agenda.
Right.
Reports. So we could still have the meeting because there's.
That's what I'm thinking. I mean, we only really need a quorum if we're taking an action.
That's correct.
Let me go offline here for just 1 second and see if I can find a phone number for Mark.
Okay, that'd be fine. And Jim, I think that's a good point. The fact that we don't have any actionable gets back to the city attorney's interpretation of things. Yeah, that's fine. But I do think that there are probably some people in the audience, or there may be, who at least want to hear what the city's thoughts and thought process is on all this, and why this isn't being reviewed.
Yeah. It's interesting. I actually looked through the legal pieces, the language and the city and everything else, and I actually understand why, but why it's not.
Yeah, no. Yeah,
but it's one of the issues that actually I discussed with council, this scope issue.
Yeah, no, I read through it as well. It made sense. I mean, it was never included. And in order to be included, it needed to have the property owner's approval.
Yeah.
Whoa, interesting.
Interesting. Never going to be included. Yes. So, but then that's part of that local decision process. So, yeah.
Well, it is, and telling something what they can do with their property or decreasing the value of that property by limiting the scope of what can be done with it is an interesting, I mean, it's a legal issue about taking without compensation.
Yes.
And so, I mean, there's a part of me that is very sympathetic with that interpretation.
I had the, we didn't get a chance to meeting beforehand, but I actually had the chance to spend about an hour inside the building.
Oh, really? Okay.
Oh, yeah. From bottom, underneath floors, basements, all the way to the top, and front to back, every piece of it. So it's I have a really clear picture of the building in my head and what it and the problems involved in it.
You know, well, apparently the water damage.
Yeah, a lot in the back.
So I've tried to reach out in every way I can. So why don't we just go ahead with informational items? I might have to leave off one small detail, but we can maybe circle back on that one. And so let's go ahead and proceed.
So then I'll just go ahead and read this into the record then, Megan. And is Jay also with us tonight too?
Jay is. I want to thank Jay for being here. I don't get to say thank you enough. I really appreciate IT helping us out with all of these meetings, not just historic preservation.
It's a blast.
Okay. So this the February 16th, 2022 Woodland Historic Preservation Commission will be conducted pursuant to Government Code Section 54953E, which allows the city to hold meetings via teleconferences during the proclaimed state of emergency when the state officials have imposed or recommended measures to promote social distances. The meeting will be held via teleconference, and the commission members and the public will participate via teleconference. Those locations are not listed on the agenda and are not accessible to the public. The public is encouraged to listen to the commission meeting live on Woodland TV channel 20, and also by going to the City of Woodland's website at cityofwoodland.org/meetings. If you wish to make a comment during the general public comment or in a specific agenda item, you may submit an email to the commission at the link, the link's not up on the board, but it's hpc@cityofwoodland.org. Prior to the public comment on the item, email comments submitted to be read into the record shall be no more than 3 minutes. When read aloud, please include the agenda item in the subject line. And that's the necessary upfront piece. I don't think we can call ourselves to order because we don't have a quorum.
Yeah, I just want to say for the record that this is informational only and no actionable items are on the agenda.
That's great.
Megan and Jim, may I suggest that we use this opportunity to explain to the listening audience, if there is anyone listening or later watching, that the commission is supposed to be construed of 5 members. Currently, there are 2 vacancies, which means, and we must have a quorum of 3 in order to conduct business. We only have 2 tonight, and there's not much room for someone not to be able to be here. We would very much encourage anyone in the community who is interested in one of the 2 vacancies to please let Megan Meyer and City Hall know, and we'll get the forms.
Thank you.
Thank you, Commissioner Lapson. That's really nicely said. So, okay. One of the questions I can ask right up front from Jay is there any members of the public currently on the call? Uh-oh, did we lose Jay?
Even isn't attending. Come on, Jay.
I'm sorry, can you repeat that?
Are there currently any members of the public on the call?
Oh, nope, just me.
Okay. Thank you so much. Appreciate it. So, okay. So then I think we can pass roll call and approval of minutes. I would like to actually go to the staff and commissioner comments then. And I think before staff comments, I would like to let the commission and the public, whoever might listen to this later, know a little bit about the City Council's meeting last Saturday, in which the council invited the commissions and the boards to talk to it about the current year and this current coming year, and what each of the commissions and boards is planning, and then bring up items that the council might be interested in. So I attended that meeting for the Historic Preservation Committee, and noted a number of items that I wanted to let everybody know about. And so I guess the first thing that I wanted to let everybody know about is I talked about our work plan that we approved, which in draft and submitted to council already, and that we were moving forward with that, and we were very much interested in getting the interns in place that we had talked about earlier to start working with us on the interactive website and in actually making the HPC website on the city's website a more robust information source for people that are interested in the history of the city. And that plan also works within a lot of the key strategies that council has in place for working this year on improving quality of life in Woodland. And from our standpoint, it has to do with sort of capturing a historical aspect of Woodland and that actual historical feel and ambiance that makes Woodland a very special place to live. And engaging that particular part of in technology will help bring public members into a better place with better knowledge. And it's also the path that pretty much every information source is going these days. If you can't look it up on your phone, you're not alive. That's just kind of the bottom line. So, especially for anybody under the age of about 40. It's really important, and I made that point to council that we need to, really embrace this concept of the electronic community as well as the in-face community, and position the historical aspects of the city with that in mind. It's not enough to see the same 3 people in front of the commission, several times a year for an award or a historic tree designation or some informational pieces. What we really need to do is get this information out to everybody. And Commissioner Lapsley had, in a number of the meetings earlier, had talked about this wealth of information that's actually available to us. All we really have to do is distill it and get it out. So that was a point that I made to council, that we really need to work in that direction. And it supports our work plan and supports the strategies that the council's working with. One of the other ones I talked about was the economic development in the downtown area. I brought up the fact that the historic stroll was a linchpin in the fall and has been for decades. And that while it has waned something in the last several years, especially with the pandemic, it's been really, really hard. I told council that the city needed to engage with the stroll committee in a solid way going forward, because that actually captures this whole concept of the historic aspect of Woodland, the downtown, and the actual historic tours and everything else. And it fits both in this ambiance and in the economic development. I go back to when I had a cafe downtown. My wife and I had a cafe, and the stroll was quite a large event with the street closed down, with 20 or 30 vendors that were there, with several thousand people walking through the downtown and going on the bike tours and the walking tours, and that while we're coming out of this pandemic, we need to basically focus on supporting that kind of development, both with council, working with the historic downtown business community, and also with the stroll, the committee, to make that essentially a signature event, like it was developing into, and that needed to also be worked into the Christmas holidays downtown. The downtown area of Woodland actually captures and that historic ambiance that people are literally looking for, that kind of old-timey Christmas venue in the downtown area that can be spread out in a larger context. But unless council actually works with the historic aspect of this and continues working with that, then they're going to lose that in the long run. So then I also talked about the aspects of fiscal responsibility that the city has, and I basically told them the position that we were coming from was that even after the pandemic is being is waned and we're getting back to something of a more normal life, the city needs to really and truly continue this concept of remote video conferencing for the public, for meetings like the commission meeting, and not just go back to the standard in-public meeting. In the world that we live in today, this concept of remote meeting structures is just normal now. It was developing normal before the pandemic, and the pandemic just rushed it up by an entire decade worth of growth happened overnight, basically. So they really need to make sure that it isn't just that we're doing it during the pandemic. We need to actually continue this development, and council needs to work with the city on the resourcing that has to get in place to actually make this happen. Resourcing is incredibly important for this kind of stuff, because if it's not easy, no one uses it. And so what you really want is the general public, and by general I mean everybody from 18 all the way up to 70 can either come in remotely or in person, and can interact that way, not just listen, but actually interact. So I think that's really important. The last thing I talked to them about was, and this was sort of one of my kind of come to the light moments was, I really asked the city council, I said, I gave them my perspective of the last 5 years of the commission. I've been on the commission for 3 years and was looking at it for 2 years before that. And in the last 5 years, the commission itself has seldom made any decisive decision about anything. It has mostly been a place where presentations are made, some discussions are had, and 2 or 3 people in the community actually come in to talk about different concepts and different things. But it's actually, the scope of the commission is extremely narrow, and it has, its usefulness is essentially run out after 3 decades. And so I suggested to the council that they need to take a serious look on whether the city actually needed a historical preservation commission. And the discussion that happened after I brought that up was interesting. Some of the council members thought about it and said, well, that's actually a very interesting thing, because there's a lot of resourcing that goes into supporting this. Not just from individual volunteers, but from city staff that have to do this work all the time. And it isn't easy work. For example, we're going to see something that has Megan put together with the city on the McGolly's florist shop. Well, that body of work didn't happen in 20 minutes. So that's hours and hours worth of staff work.
Jim, may I interrupt there just for a moment? And I want to continue. That work would have had to have been done no matter whether the Historical Preservation Commission existed or not in that particular case. It would have been internal, but it would have been done. There's an incremental amount more that needed to be done to be able to share with us and the public. And I'm sorry, I just wanted to make that clear. And I'm very much agreeing with all of your points, so please continue.
Oh, thank you. And you're absolutely correct, Commissioner Lapsley, that they would have had to done that work. Correct. One of the things that the council asked about, whether the commission's scope of effort should be expanded. So to make it more useful. For instance, we do nothing with, historical agricultural concepts, lands, processes, and we're a huge agricultural community. There was discussion about, the Heidrich Museum, which is basically we have no interaction with whatsoever from a historical perspective. So is there some path that the commission could go in the future that actually somehow wove a broader picture of the historical processes and historical places that actually Woodland encompasses, rather than the sort of the historic downtown district and the occasional historic trees and historical buildings that are coming up before us. And so council actually talked about going back to staff, the city staff, and having the city staff come up with some recommendations on what to do next. So that was the outcome of that. And so I wanted to let everybody know that that's kind of what that was all about. And it certainly was a fast half hour. So.
Commissioner Lapsley here, I'd like to respond. First of all, thank you for attending. For family reasons, I was not able to attend. I would have liked to. It seems like it was probably quite an interesting time. I agree with all of your points that you brought up. The last one was quite interesting. I did want to say something quickly about the stroll. For the last, and for those who may be watching this either now or later on television, the last community television, for the last 5 years, I have been the chair of the Stroll Through History. I have stepped down. When I joined up, I said I'd do it for 5 years, and I've done it for 5 years. And I'm now working on historical projects having to do with the county and the city. However, so I wanted to be clear on that I no longer am, I can no longer serve as a representative of both the commission and the Stroll Through History. The current chair is Angela Hyde, who I think is doing an excellent job. And their plan for this year is going to be focusing on mid-century modern homes, which I think is quite interesting. And we were able to hold the strolls this last year. And I think we had about 420, 430 people. Perhaps 20 or 30 fewer than in past years, but still really quite good after the or during a pandemic. And as far as I know, it was not a spreader event, and we didn't see, and I'd be aghast if it had been, but we didn't see any problems coming from that. So it is back and is going to continue. And I think that the current board would be very interested in talking with the city council about some sort of expanded scope and perhaps support for that. But since I'm no longer on the board, I cannot speak for them. The notion, your last notion about bringing in, about whether or not this should exist and our commission should exist, and if so, how it can have utility is, I think, very important. Let's just say, I think that because of the pandemic and it's not being able to meet every month, it has taken its toll on all of us. At the same time, there's also issues about things that have occurred or did occur, such as the Epperson building being torn down, which really was within our scope of influence, without really being told or having any say or really public comment, was really quite disappointing. So I think these sorts of things do need to be discussed. And finally, I guess with your third point, that in the future, these sorts of things should become electronic in some way. There's a cost associated to that, of course, but I think that ultimately that is going to make it much more approachable for citizens. And certainly after COVID, the new normal is not going to be the old normal. It's going to be different, and it is going to be electronic to a larger percent than it ever was before. So I think all of your points were very well taken, and thank you again very much.
Thank you very much. So that I will conclude my comments and ask Megan, do staff have comments?
I just want to say that I heard from the city manager that it was a really successful retreat with city council, and They appreciated your participation a lot because they don't get to connect with the commissions very often and find out kind of what's going on, with the groups that do have an impact in the community and are kind of the eyes and ears for the community. And I think some of your comments are really, spot on and are things to think about. I think we already have internally a meeting on our calendar to discuss some of the items that you brought up and provide, future comments to council. I think that, as you mentioned, kind of the manpower behind some of our initiatives, once we get some of the interns in place, I think that they had a good start and, I think that they were spot on, it sounds like, in terms of what council was also kind of the trajectory of council and communication to the public. And so I think that those are still things that are important to pursue.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Well, it was a very good discussion. What I found heartening about the council's position was all of them, to a person, were quite interested in making sure that we did not lose this historical perspective of the town, which was I found very nice. And so that's part of what Woodland is its history. And so they were looking for, how this could be continued in a meaningful sense, rather than just the way we've been kind of plodding along for the last 5 years or so.
Yeah, I mean, I think that's why this commission exists, because it is one of the huge important elements of Woodland, and what makes Woodland is the historic fabric and the historic downtown. So I think that, in whatever configuration it ultimately ends up, or even maybe the expansion of the existing, scope of what we look at, I think it's something that they are going to need to incorporate in some way.
Thank you.
Thank you for all of that, communication to this group.
Well, okay, then I think we're at public comments, and I'll ask if there are members of the public on the call.
No, we're clear.
Okay, then I think we're presentations.
Well, thank you again, commissioners, for joining. And I will bring up my presentation here. Can you see my screen okay?
Yes, we can, or I can.
Yes.
Looks like it's not advancing.
It's not.
Are you seeing advancing?
Hey, Megan, I think you're on a multi-screen mode, because I can see all of your slides and your notes and everything.
Right.
Okay.
Yeah, obviously you're not in presentation mode.
Let's see here.
Are you on your two-screen monitor?
Yeah.
Two-screen.
Mm-hmm.
Up in the top menu, can you click on slideshow?
Top menu of Zoom or my PowerPoint?
Your PowerPoint.
Oops.
A little bit over, two more over. Where's the slideshow?
Slide master. Oh, slideshow.
All right, up just a little bit higher.
On the top bar. Maybe.
Right above notes. It says
Thank
slideshow. Can you click on the use presenter view? There's a checkbox in the middle near the top. Use presenter view.
Yeah,
A little
right,
bit to the right.
right in the middle of the screen, Megan. There you go.
You had it.
Let's see if this
The
changes.
use presenter view is a checkbox.
Right there. Check it. Yeah. Check it. There we go.
All right, give me 1 second. Let me see if I can.
Well, how about just going down to the bottom of your screen on the right where you click the that one right there and see what happens.
Well, it is up on my other screen. Let me see if I can.
Yeah. If she does that, she won't be able to actually read her notes.
Okay. Okay. Well, that's impressive.
That went really large.
I think Jay is on his way over. We'll figure this out.
That might be me right now.
We have the same problems when
There we
do
are.
presentation,
Au revoir.
Okay. Let's see if it's going to let me advance.
You use your arrow keys on your keyboard.
Perfect.
Okay, now we're in business. Sorry about the technical difficulty. So I just wanted to give you a little update on some of the happenings in downtown. And I pulled up the website for the special events for the downtown area. And this has kind of all the events throughout the summertime and even into the fall. But some of the notable ones are that First Friday is starting up again, and that started this February. And everyone, enjoys coming downtown, doing the art walk, and hearing some live music. So that's a nice addition to the downtown going into the springtime here. Celebrate Woodland. As you know, the city had kind of geared up for a big celebration, and we had COVID also gear up for a big outbreak. And so that kind of got sidelined. It is coming back, but not to the extent that it really was staged for, because it was just hard to transition that again to another date. But it will be combined with a First Friday, and there will be extra booths and music and a celebration for Woodland. Some other ones that have been on the docket before: Food Truck Mania, the car shows in our downtown, which do kind of support the historic nature of the downtown with the historic car shows that come into the vintage cars that come into town. And then also California Honey Festival, which has historically been a big event for the downtown. I just want to also note that you can still get your 150th anniversary embroidered hat here at the CDD office. Other notes for our downtown, we do have a new business going into Evaggio's old location, the Yaquis Cantina, and they will be kind of a bar and grill, and they also do catering. And they're slated to go in within the next couple of months and be open for the spring and summer. And they're going to have a nice outdoor patio as well. They've already strung lights there, and so it will be a great venue for the Friday events in the downtown as well. And then also I wanted to point out that the city has an initiative to look at rebranding their logo. And they are asking feedback on all of the different platforms: Facebook, Twitter, email, and it's also on our city webpage for the rebranding of Woodland to get ideas. I think they want to encompass kind of a lot more in Woodland than some of the different aspects that we're kind of our communities growing into in the city logo. So that's part of the initiative for the downtown as well. This one, I just wanted to bring up, the dates, possible dates for the Heritage Home Awards. I think that we can't really decide on a full date until we have our other commissioners on board. But I know that in the past, and we can think about this further, we had talked about aligning it with the Woodland, the Celebrate Woodland. And that is going to be, let me look at the date here. So that's going to be April 8th. And we do already have the plaques and everything kind of queued up for the Heritage Home Awards. So we could do this on a relatively, short notice. And so I will kind of be in contact with the commissioners, maybe even at another meeting, but we will need to decide this soon to get those things prepared. But in the past, commissioners have presented the homes that they've brought forward, and we would send out formal invitations. This has been a long time coming, so there's a lot of homes that have been kind of queued up for this and patiently waiting. There was a request by one homeowner to receive the plaque early, and I think we might accommodate them. I think I had spoken with the commission before on that. We also did get another application for a nomination, self-nomination. This was a gentleman that actually works at the Woodland Skilled Nursing at 678 3rd Street near Cross Street. And he had been doing a newsletter for the skilled nursing home, just kind of a historical and happenings. And he did a little research on the building and found out that it was built in the 1920s and really took a liking to the history of the building and wanted to look into nominating the building for the next cycle. So we're already receiving, nominations coming in for buildings that want to be represented in the next Heritage Home Awards. So.
Megan?
Maybe I'll pause there and just see if you guys have any comments or questions.
Yes, this Commissioner Lapsley, I do have a comment, and I guess it's a question as well. You had mentioned before that the Celebrate Woodland 150th would be part of one of the first Fridays, and so that's what we're looking at, the April 8th. I think it would be entirely appropriate to have these be again part of that. And I think that would fit in very well with the City Council's interest in really promoting our history, because these homes are our history. They're where our community lives. So I'd be very much for that.
Well, we might have to have a special meeting, but that is not uncommon for the Heritage Home Awards, where they have a special meeting that gets noticed for a different date than our normal third Wednesday. And then the other thought was, maybe having some portion of it virtual, but maybe having, if we're not doing in-person inside meetings still at a city level, we could always have a garden, presentation to present the plaques and have the boards up with the homes presented in the garden area and have the lights on or something like that, even as part of the Friday celebration. So that might be something that we can work in.
This is Commissioner Bowen. I agree with Commissioner Lapsley. I actually think that having this award presentation on the 150th on our first Friday actually works well. And it also gives a little more impetus to kind of getting this particular award done, because it's been languishing for a long time.
It really has, yeah.
And so, I know the homeowners have known about it for a very long time, and I'm sure they're maybe not anxiously awaiting, but they would like it, I'm sure. And making it part of that would actually, it's celebrating history, 150 years. So it works really well together. I agree.
Yeah, I think there are a couple of homeowners that are very anxious to receive the plaque. So I think the sooner that we set a time and get the invitations out, probably the better. So thank you for your comments on that. So I will just kind of roll right into our informational presentation for the 2 Main Street former Mangali's Florist building. And I know that we have had some kind of, there's been conversation in the community about the redevelopment of the site. And so I thought it was important to bring this before the Historic Preservation Commission and have kind of an informational presentation, both for transparency and to show kind of the process that staff went through and some of the information on the design of the new building. So as you know from the staff report that is also found online for the public can access, staff did look at the building in terms of listing, and it was listed in the one of our historic surveys as a potential local resource. And we are directed by our city code to do further historical resource analysis. We did engage a sub-consultant group to do that analysis, and they conducted it and found that the building, it was constructed in 1936 and was of Art Deco architectural detail, and that it also was a kind of rare Egyptian revival Art Deco that is not actually found very commonly here in Northern California. It's found more often in Southern California. There's some really great examples, but in terms of the northern part of the state, Woodland and some in Sacramento and San Francisco Bay Area region, there's just a few. And for Woodland in particular, there's really no other types of buildings that have this Egyptian revival. You'll notice that the building itself is rather plain, actually. It is kind of a rectangular building with these, more detailed elements to it. So I wouldn't say actually the entire building has, distinct Art Deco elements, but these details on the building are quite nice. As part of staff's analysis, we also were charged with looking at the CEQA environmental analysis on the building. The applicant had requested to demo the building and do reuse of the site for a Western dental building. Staff did have concern up front in our pre-application about the historic nature of the building and let the applicant know. So he was aware and funded the historic analysis, resource analysis review of the building. Staff did have further discussion with the city attorney on our code and the requirements of our code because it actually is not within the historic, National Historic Downtown District. So it is not in a nationally listed district. And as the report, the historic resource analysis report outlines, it doesn't meet the standard for federal or state listing, but does meet the standard for potential local resource as a local resource listing. However, with kind of further look at our code, Woodland is a property rights oriented community as well, even though we have, kind of these two sides of how we look at properties and we value the historic nature of these buildings. Our code does say that for a local listing, it does require the property owners sign off on that local listing. And so then the second layer of that was the CEQA analysis and looking at the environmental and if that triggers a further historic review. And after talking with the city attorney, because it is a ministerial action under our code, it does not trigger CEQA analysis. If it had triggered CEQA analysis, it would have required probably a slim EIR, which is pretty costly and does take some time. And, I think that we did do a site visit, as Jim Bohan may have alluded to earlier in the meeting, with both Jim in attendance and myself, and also the building official. And we thoroughly went through the building, and as Jim may kind of attest to as well, it had extensive water damage within the building, and the transom windows had extensive damage. You can't see them here, but underneath the awnings on the west side, there's some very lovely transom windows, but they had extensive rot and damage and water damage to them as well. So it was a good site visit just to kind of get an understanding of the building and redevelopment potential. And it is unreinforced masonry within the building wall under the stucco. So kind of having an idea of, if the site were to be redeveloped even in a more minor way or brought back, kind of the level of cost and the level of, redevelopment that would take. The property was, even just visually looking at the building's interior, it was apparent that there had been some, damage occurring over a long period of time to this building. So Jim, I don't know, I'll pause if you want to add anything to that.
Thank you, Megan. So this Commissioner Bowen here again. I did have the opportunity to spend a lot of time in it and walk through it with the building officials and also the contractor that's actually looking to actually work on the site. The construction is interesting. There's some great timber in it. Unfortunately, that's about all that's great inside of it. The rest of it's in extremely poor condition. The roofing systems are falling apart. The wiring is all substandard. There's I think 3 additions on the back over periods of time that have not been done well and not integrated at all into the architecture. They're just boxes plopped on the back. And one of those, unfortunately, has a kind of a 3/4 height second floor in it, which has got a bathroom in it that was leaking and in very, very bad shape. You would probably have to begin with, you'd probably have to remove the additions and start from there. And the unreinforced masonry, trying to restore the building in some way with that kind of bones to it would be just about impossible. I'm not sure they could do that. And meeting any kind of current codes would make it so prohibitively expensive that I doubt that anybody would actually venture to do that. And then we would have the same problem that we've had in a couple of places with it end up being a camping site for homeless people. And they've already had the problem here in this particular site, and they had to have the police out a number of times already. Mm-hmm. So I agree. I think that the building itself is in poor condition. I love the architecture. It's very fascinating and certainly one of a kind within Woodland. And so from that perspective, I think that the solution that we came up with is actually a good outcome overall.
Yeah, I just wanted to kind of piggyback on that a little bit, that I think that, the community had there was some swirling on next door. I think the community has a real bond with the Mangali's establishment. It's been in the community since the 1930s as a florist. It was actually first, it's been a florist since the 1930s, but it was originally the C.L. Pugue. I'm not sure if I'm saying that correctly. Do you guys know? Pugue Memorial Florist, and it served the community since the 1930s as, you know, a florist. And so I think that there is you know, somebody here in our office said, you know, I grew up looking at the windows in Bengalis. They changed them every season with the holiday, and it was really a treat. And it's on such a prominent corner, you know, on West and Main. And so I think that, you know, nobody in Woodland, you know, or everyone in Woodland knew this building, and they know this building. So I think that there was, you know, an emotional attachment to the building. That being said, I think there's some beautiful architectural elements on the building, you know, that represent this Egyptian revival Art Deco that the planning staff was, you know, very interested in working with the applicant to, you know, bring into the current design in some way. You know, the historic part of it has, under our code, took a little turn, but it still goes through design review and site plan review, and that's still relevant, and it still should address concerns by the community. It still should address, you know, the context of this building, which is a standalone building on a very prominent corner. And so we did talk to the applicant, and he knew upfront that there was concern by the community about this building being demoed. And we discussed the idea of architectural reuse. So they did contact a gentleman here in town, Sean Denny, who has done some other architectural historic replicas for buildings in our downtown. And he came out and did an assessment with the applicant. And they actually did take a couple of pieces off the building. You may have noticed that. And they really were literally just hanging on the building with a hook and plastered around the edges. So in any type of seismic situation, they could have easily come off the building. But fortunately for us, that was an easy way of you know, Sean looking at them in terms of making a replica mold. It would not be easy to reuse the original elements. They are relatively fragile and difficult to seismically, under our current code, put back onto a building. But Sean was able to kind of, you know, look at these and make replica molds of them. So that's what we had a discussion with the applicant about, incorporating some of these elements into the building. And so kind of the process of how we did that. So looking here, we had a discussion with the applicant about kind of key elements of Art Deco architecture. And some of those we brought up are, you know, the existence of really strong horizontal lines, you know, some of the existing column elements that break the horizontal lines, banding details, flat parapet roof lines with some architectural detailing, the idea of smooth stucco, which you'll see on a lot of these historic buildings, and a simple color palette and with dark accents. So those are some of the elements that we worked with the applicant to bring into the current design, and the idea of, you know, that we could meld kind of a more contemporary look with some of these Art Deco elements. I mean, even some of these buildings on the left is pretty contemporary looking and very clean lines, but has some, you can't see it, but it has some Art Deco detailing over the windows and the strong elements of horizontal banding. So looking now at the building, these are working drawings, but some of the elements I wanted to point out that we are incorporating into the new building, they are bringing in the column elements on the corners with the original, you know, replica of the toppers. So those will be just like on the original building. They are incorporating the horizontal banding along the top and having some stronger horizontal lines with insets around the window portions. and having the column elements kind of bump over above those horizontal banding lines. We also have asked that they do kind of a dramatic light on the facade to have kind of up-down light casting, especially along the west side of the building, to kind of give an element of, you know, these columns here they have jointing off the column, but to give a kind of more dramatic look, we'll have this light element on those columns as well. We also did talk to them about some of the color palette and the stucco. So they have agreed. We first talked to them about a smooth stucco that is very costly because they have to hand trowel all of the stucco onto the building. It also experiences cracking. So we get a lot of pushback from applicants on the smooth stucco. We are going with a very fine sand stucco, which looks similar to smooth. It has a very fine grain to it. So they will be doing that on the body of the building, and they will be having black accents at the windows and over the cantilever over the main entryway. They are keeping an element. I don't have the rear elevation, but they are going to keep the sunburst with the wing elements, the Egyptian kind of scarab look at the back of the building that will be over the doorways. The other element on the west side, they have opted to put black awnings up, similar to Mengali's, a little more contemporary. And they will be black to kind of match all the other accenting because the sun directly goes in on the west side. But there was an option for, and I'm kind of bringing this to this group, that we discussed on the north and the east elevation to do the lotus design over the window. They actually have a pop out that will be over the window areas, and there was the discussion to have the lotus design put over the windows on the east elevation and then also on the north elevation, so that all three elements on the original building will be on the new building as well. So I'll get some feedback from this group, but I'll just kind of finish out this presentation here. I just wanted to finish by showing also a site plan that we are working with the applicant on extensive landscaping for the area. They are doing some hydro modification that they need for engineering, but our comments were that they need to have very distinct landscape design for this corner because it is so visible. Art Deco tends to have a little more structured landscapes around them, and so we are working with them on, the tree selection, and the planting selections for all the planting beds. But with that, I just want to kind of bring it back to the group here and hear any comments or observations that you have.
Well, this is Commissioner Bowen. I actually am very happy to hear that the city's engaged them on the Lotus items over the windows. That was not in the elevations I saw just about 3-4 weeks ago. So I'm really happy to see that, because it was one of the elements that they were concerned that they couldn't get those because they were so large, and the on top of the windows they weren't sure quite how they were going to be viewable, and so I'm really happy to see that. One of the things for Commissioner Lapsley, I don't know if you noticed, but the scale of the replicas is different than the scale on the original building, because the new building, the new elevation is larger. So what they've done, Denny, on is to actually create the electronic mold for this particular architecture as well, so they can upscale and match the scale of the building so that it won't look kind of odd, which is really nice. So I'm really happy that actually got taken care of as well. So, and the scarab over the back door is kind of nice. So It's the only, you couldn't put it over the front because the front entrance is just way too big.
Yeah, and I think it would get kind of lost. I mean, it will be an added, the alleyway has visibility from the alleyway too. And even from West Street, actually, you'll be able to see the back of the building. And it's nice to have all of the details from the original building on the new one. I would like to say also, they are going to use a more monochromatic color scheme for the building, much like the pictures that I've presented with the black accents.
Commissioner Lapsley here. I think the city has done very well on this. This will clearly be the most beautiful building on a very ugly corner of town. I'm not quite sure about that. Considering that, I guess this is a compromise, and it's an interesting compromise in the considering that the city really does not have a whip hand on this. There will be elements of our community that would really are going to mourn the loss of the building, but from the descriptions that I've heard, the building was going to need to be lost fairly soon anyway because it was decaying. And the notion of someone going in and fixing it up on that particular corner seems to me wishful thinking. So I think that being able to get something that is artistic and nice and that has actually mimics to some degree what was there, I think is really a win for the city. And I'm pleased that whoever is going forward with this is willing to spend what I assume is definitely extra money to meet this and meet community demands. So congratulations, my hat off to the city for this.
Great, thank you for your comments. This was Commissioner Bonigan, this was an interesting process to go through as well. In this particular case, the commission, as the chair of the commission, I got involved in it early, which actually gave the contractor the opportunity to actually flesh out some ideas before the planning process. And then going into the planning process, the mindset was a little different, I think, than just simply bulldozing and sticking a square building up. So that was a very interesting process to go through. It might be an interesting model for the future.
That is something actually we may discuss internally at our meeting. Planning Commission has what they call a design liaison. And right now it's made up of 2 members, I believe. And they do look at projects that are going to go before Planning Commission beforehand. Like we have all of the subdivisions in Spring Lake would go to the design liaison, and we would have internal discussion with the design liaison prior to going to Planning Commission. It is helpful. And it also kind of gears, focuses us on the key important issues that Planning Commission might have. So it is something to think about for, these types of processes. I think even though, we may not have we have a code that is more property rights driven. We, as the city, also have in place extensive design guidelines and extensive, criteria for our design review that does give us leverage to discuss these things with the applicant and work with them on these types of things. And those are places that HPC maybe can be engaged on these buildings that have a historic background.
Commissioner Lapsley here. The only other comment I might make is that for some of the exterior, perhaps facade or maybe some of the things in the interior, you had mentioned that there was a fair amount of rot. Perhaps the Yolo County Archives could be contacted and someone could see if they would be interested in having 1 or 2 pieces to be put in storage. Just whether or not you want to store things like that, I don't know. I know that over at the Gibson House, there's a lot of material that has been stored, and they probably have room. What one does with a corner piece or a or a sunburst, I don't know, and I'm not sure if they'd be interested, but there might be one or two pieces that someone might want to save.
That actually has come up, and I'm in discussion with the applicant to see if the city can retain some of the pieces.
Mm-hmm.
Well, thank you, Megan.
Well, thank you. And I think that concludes my presentation. If you have any other questions, I don't know.
I don't have any other questions at this point. Commissioner Lapsley, do you have any other questions?
None at this time.
Okay. And since we don't have a quorum, we don't get to do business. So I think we finished our agenda.
Well, I thank you for your time, and I really thank Jay for hanging on the line with us. And we will circle back on, definitely need to talk more about the logistics of Heritage Home, given the direction that I think we're going. So I will see if we can get either internal, we'll get that kind of going. I'll figure out how we can communicate with each other if we need another meeting.
And Commissioner Lapsley here, I want to reiterate, I think that if the presentation could be done within the context of the 150th when there's already an audience, I think that may, not everyone is aware of the Historical Home Award. And this would give us greater awareness, and I think would just be generally good for the city. And I'd certainly encourage on that. I also know that we're down on commissioners, and if you need me and others to do several home awards or presentations, I'm certainly going to do that. Thank you.
Okay. Thank you for that offer. I might be taking you up on it.
Yeah, this is Commissioner Bowen. I will add my name into that list as well, Commissioner Lapsley, to make sure that this can happen. So.
Great. Well, thank you for the evening. I think we'll conclude.
Well, thank you very much. Have a good rest of your week.
Bye all.
Thank you, Jay.
Thank you. You guys have a great night.